The Supreme Court heard oral arguments today for a case that could expand religious freedom rights for convicted inmates. The justices consider the question of whether a convicted inmate on death row should be allowed to have a pastor audibly pray and lay his hands on an inmate while that inmate is being executed. And joining me now is Andrea Picciotti-Bayer, director of the Conscious Project. Andrea, welcome back. Great to see you.
It is great to be here in person.
Great to see you indeed. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this case and why it's important when it comes to religious freedom.
Well, you know, Tracy, this is a very interesting situation, and it shows that most cases that get to the Supreme Court aren't easy cases. This is, again, the court having to balance religious freedom interests of the death row inmate, John Ramirez, versus the important deference that we give to prison officials, especially in this delicate matter, dealing with, you know, putting a man to death. The oral argument was very interesting, but I also want to focus a little bit on what brought this individual to death row and mention that the person that he killed, Pablo Castro, was a father of 9. It was done at a robbery, and he was able, you know, John Ramirez stole $1.25 out of Castro's pockets. His children have filed briefs with the court, and Justice Kavanaugh mentioned during oral argument the importance of closure for victims' families in this issue. So it's a very interesting matter, but that's got a lot of nuance to it as well.
Yeah, really difficult for sure. How do you think this is going to shake out, this case? I mean, I know it's hard to say, but how do you think the court will rule?
You know, it's very difficult, and I think that the court and all of the justices were struggling. Many of them were very active during oral argument. The first was a concern by Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Samuel Alito talking about the concern that they have for a flood of cases that could come to the court, raising what they're concerned about as maybe illegitimate claims of religious freedom. The second issue was raised by Justice Thomas, and that's the sincerity of Ramirez's belief. And Justice Thomas was concerned that perhaps he's gaming the system. Normally in religious freedom cases, the courts never question sincerity, but in these prison cases, sometimes you need to kind of peel back the onion. And the third issue was raised by, again, Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Barrett on how does the state respect the religious freedom rights of inmates and at the same time comply with their needs and their compelling state interests for order and minimizing the risk of something going wrong during these very important times, especially during an execution.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, you know, what happens here. I want to switch gears a little bit. Over the weekend, as you know, the Federal Appeals Court issued a stay on the Biden administration's mandate for the COVID-19 vaccine. Interestingly, about a week or so ago, the Supreme Court actually shot down a request to block Maine's vaccine mandate for healthcare workers. And this case, I understand, specifically had to do with religious exemptions. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Well, first it's important to note that the federal rule that's being promoted by President Biden does allow for religious exemptions. Maine, curiously enough, allows for a medical exemption, but not a religious exemption. So the request that was brought on behalf of Maine healthcare workers to the Supreme Court was a request to stay that state's mandate that all healthcare workers in many healthcare facilities be vaccinated by a certain period of time. And they said because of the lack of a religious exemption. It was a disappointing decision by the court not to take up the case on an emergency basis, but it's not the end of the story. This case will continue, and there are other cases that are raising these issues involving New York's mandate and Rhode Island. So I think in light of the fact that there are issues percolating up, it's really going to be a matter of time before the Supreme Court has to address this matter on the merits.
Yeah, and I know it's a really big deal in Maine. Speaking of Maine, we only have maybe less than a minute left, but I do want to get to this because I know this is a case that you're following as well. It has to do with school choice in the state of Maine. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, see, on December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, the Supreme Court will host oral arguments on Maine's school choice law that specifically prevents money from going to students that will attend religious institutions. And the state says that religious institutions aren't just because of their religious identity, but because of the religious nature of what they're doing. And that really involves the state kind of in getting into the middle of these curriculum it's a second bite at the apple, I guess, for the Supreme Court to look at these issues. They did so last year in a case involving Montana's school choice. And I think if we're reading the tea leaves, the Supreme Court really will clarify that when states have school choice initiatives, they can't discriminate on the basis of religion.
And I know you'll continue to follow that, and we'll be following that as well. Andrea, thank you so much for your time and coming on. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Tracy.